Now it's time to move on to our third interesting session, strategies and frameworks for AI governance. Dear participants, it's my privilege to introduce Ms. Anushka Beohar, a dynamic professional in the field of data and AI solutions, currently serving as a brand technical specialist at IBM in Bangalore. At IBM, Anushka has played a key role in accelerating clients' data journeys. Prior to this, her experience as a pre-sales analyst at Dell Technologies and as an assistant system engineer at Tata Consultancy Services showcases her technical powers and dedication. Anushka holds a bachelor's in computer science from Rajiv Gandhi college and in a continual learner with certifications in requirements elicitation and analysis, information storage and management, business analysis foundation, and lean sigma great belt. Her internship at Reliance Jio reflects her versatility and industry experience. Ms. Anushka embodies innovation and expertise in data and AI solutions. Join me in extending a warm welcome to gain insights from her rich professional journey. Please welcome Ms. Anushka. Let's invite Ms. Anushka for giving her expertise on strategies and frameworks for AI governance. Thank you for being us with Anushka ma'am. Welcome you ma'am.
Thanks a lot. I hope my audio is okay
Yes
and you
ma'am.
guys can hear me well. All right. Thank you. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I'll straight in jump to the session. I'm a little short on time, so I don't want to, waste any more time. Let's just get started.
Yeah ma'am.
Sure. Just let me know once my screen is visible.
Yes ma'am. Your screen is visible.
All right. So I did hear a lot bit of Dr. Sanmitra's session, and I think it was a very, very informative session. Now we all know how LLMs are built. What are they really? So I wanted to focus on this LLM from a slightly different angle. That how do we make them more responsible, more transparent, and how do we really govern them, right? Because it's not just that you train a model and you start getting answers from it. As an organization, as enterprises, it is really important that you can trust it, that you can use it, and all of that can happen when you can really govern those models, right? So without governance, that trust, that explainability, all of that cannot really happen. So before I move and I, tell you in details about the governance aspects, a little bit of context settings in terms of what are these risks really that are associated with um, the large language models. I'm sure all of you day in, day out hear some kind of news with respect to the current AI landscape, right? There is some lawsuit, some regulation, somebody is being sued, somebody is giving you wrong answers. So a lot of risks are really facing us, right? It's not just on us individuals that our digital identity could be exposed, our personal information could be exposed, but as an organization also you really face the risk of losing your credibility and your reputation, right? So you cannot really have all this at stake when you are a big enterprise. So then we need to focus on what are these risks really, right? These risks, now I can yeah, now my screen's better. So the risks can, I have just categorized them broadly into what are the risks associated with input and then with output. As we just learned, a lot of data goes into training these large language models, right? So if you do not use that large amount of data, or if you use biased data, then your model is at risk of being biased in giving its outputs as well, right? It could be biased towards gender, towards geography, towards some strata of the society. It could be any kind of bias really, right? And then there are these data poisoning attacks. So when data engineer, when data scientists are training those models, they are prompting those models, they could expose some false information into those models, right? So then your model again is at risk. It could be poisoned with wrong data, with maybe personal information, copyright infringement, and all of those issues can really happen when it is not trained and when it is not being used in the right manner. And in the inference phase as well, as I just mentioned, the prompt could be leaked, it could be wrong, there could be certain legal issues with respect to not using the right kind of data. So with large language models, or for example, with any AI ML models, really, it really follows the policy of garbage in, garbage out. So whatever you put into the data, into the training, is what you're gonna really get as an output, right? So if you've entered biased data, the output, the results are going to be biased as well. So the content which is generated, that could be again biased. For example, let me just take here an example of a bank. If the credit department, if they've used small section of data, right, and then they end up using that model, so then they could be really lending out loans or credit cards to maybe a certain strata of a society, maybe a certain gender, maybe a certain geography. So some marginalized section which was not represented in the training of data, they could be left. Now that is a huge bias. The banks cannot afford to really do that. So one has to be really sure that the data which has gone in is bias free. And then there could be performance disparity, copyright infringement, so many legal issues that we face today, really, right? So whatever has been wronged during the input phase, that will definitely show up as an output. So then, of course, these challenges, Dr. Sanmitra also highlighted that there could be transparency issues, diversity issues, environmental impact. That is also a really huge topic, right? Because these large language models are so huge, they require a lot of compute to run. So there are huge environmental impacts also, that whether you really need a model which is a 13 billion, which is a 70 billion model to do small NLP tasks, or can you use relatively smaller models. So those kind of decisions everybody needs to take, and everybody needs to keep in mind that there are these risks which are associated. So what do you really do about it? How do you go about these risks? um, yeah, just one more slide where these regulations are very are coming closer, right? Every country, every state in the US, there is a new regulation which is being laid out every day. In fact, in India as well, we've heard about the DPDP bill, the data protection bill, right? And Niti Aayog, that is also working on the establishment of strategy for artificial intelligence. How are we as a country, which cannot have the last mover disadvantage? We really need to make it an advantage. We've always heard about first mover advantage, but as in India, we could be behind those developed countries. So we cannot have that at risk, right? It should, we should turn around to make it into a last mover advantage. Those are the things that organizations, that government are really focusing on. So when you think of using these large language models, you have to think about so many other things as well, right? It's not just about hiring the right data scientists and getting them to build the right model. You really have to think holistically in terms of uh, how as an enterprise am I making a model which can be trusted and which is governed at each step, really. So we these are some facts, some those surveys which were run by Accenture, by PwC, by KPMGs, and these are the numbers, and these numbers are really high, right? These are the numbers which have come out because today everybody wants to be ensured that there is no risk in using these models. So the 90% of leaders are concerned that the operating costs could be up by 30%, because with huge opportunity that we see in LLMs, there are huge risks as well associated with it. So these numbers are really high there, where everybody is grappling with these challenges, that how do I manage, how do I govern, what do I really do? So just highlighting that it is everybody's business, not just organizations. Even we as individuals should be really careful about what kind of data are we exposing to the model when we use those models for everyday questioning, answering, and how are we trusting it? Are we taking all of it and just trusting it blindly, or are we able to regulate it, or are we able to trace its source? How do we trust those answers, and how do we ensure that we don't leak our personal information onto these models? So it's not just organizations, it is everybody's business, that we need to be sure that these risks are covered and we are also aware of these risks. So then I spoke so much about risk and what can go wrong. Now everybody could be scared about that, but let's focus on how can we make this platform now trustworthy, because AI is everywhere, generative AI is everywhere. We cannot escape it, right? There is no development without being hand in hand with the latest technology. So now we can focus on the how to get it done, right? How to make these platforms trustworthy. So there are a few questions that all of us can ask. So number one being, how was it trained? So with what kind of data went into the training? A model that was trained on a Wikipedia crawl, can it really be trusted? We know how credible source of a Wikipedia is, right? So how was it trained? Which data really went into the training? Was the material, gotten rid of the PII, the copyright, and the legal issues? Was that data removed or masked? And what really went into the training? So once you ensure that your training data is clean, it is secured, that is how you really begin to trust that model. Then can it detect and minimize bias and hallucination? So of course it is a model, it is bound to be sometimes wrong, it could be biased, it could be hallucinating, it could be providing wrong answers. But then what do you really do to detect that bias and then correct those bias, right? How do you minimize the risk when it comes to giving wrong answers or hallucinating or being biased? So you should really be able to say that, I am able to monitor, I know when my model hallucinates. So these are the certain thresholds that I will put in place. When it crosses those thresholds, I'm going to get an alert and I'm going to make sure my model does not bias, it does not hallucinate. And along with that, is that model transparent? Whether it is a black box of AI where we do not know anything about what went into it and how is it used, what was the training, anything, you don't know anything about it, or whether it is transparent, that you know what kind of data it was trained on, and the answers that it generates are explainable, right? You are able to explain, you're able to give it a reason, that this is my generated answer and this is the reason behind it, or this is the source of truth behind it. So it needs to be explainable as well. And then of course it should support those regulatory compliances. If you are in Europe, if you're in US, if you're in some state, you need to follow all of the regulations that have been laid out by the government. So it should support all these regulatory compliance, privacy issues, infringement issues and whatnot, right? And then it has to be really safe, right? Because when your model, say for example, gives wrong answer, then who is responsible, who has the control over it? And can you ensure that that confidential information is not given out? So you need to put certain guardrails in place, you need to put certain safety measures in place, that I am making sure that it is safe, and these are the guardrails that I've put into the place. And then lastly, when you have gotten all of this right, you also need to have that model to be flexible, right? Can it be deployed anywhere? Do I have to arrange hardware for that, or can I use just it as a service? Is it available on cloud? Can I customize it? You have given me a large language model, but I have a very domain specific use case. For example, in pharma itself, right? How many models do you see today which are specifically trained on pharmaceutical data? So you can take these large language models and then train it with your labeled data, with your domain specific data. And that's when you can fully utilize that large language model for your domain, for your specific use case, right? So it should be customizable as well. And then is it can I integrate it with other applications as well? For example, if I want to feed my source of documents, my repository, my knowledge base, can it integrate with that data source platforms? Can it integrate with my front end platforms? And how do I really make it a part of my ecosystem, instead of having everything new in the place around the model? The model should fit in my ecosystem, right? So it should be customizable in that sorts, that I don't have to change everything, I'm just introducing one element into my ecosystem, and it is integrable into my ecosystem as well. So those are the really things that you need to think about when you think about being able to trust a model, right? These are certain parameters, these are certain guidelines that you can follow, and you can ask yourselves, and you can really ensure that whether that platform can be trustworthy or not. So, of course, AI governance and all of those things that I spoke about, it's easier said than done, right? It is complicated, because what we're saying is that you trace the documents, the origin of data, associated models, metadata. The entire data pipeline needs to be audited when you think of governing, right from the source to the output. Everything needs to be governed. Now, that is easier said than done. Your documentation, which techniques did you use to train your model? What were the metrics? What were the hyperparameters in the testing phase? You need to ensure that all of these things are audited, and not just once, not just before making it go live, not just before production. Even after production, you need to continuously monitor these things. So now with enterprises, one size cannot fit all, right? One company could be using certain other frameworks or certain other technique, other could be using something else. So one size cannot fit all. So this lack of standardized tools, platforms, this also results in a lot of manual work. One has to do a lot of manual work in ensuring that you get the right um, people in place, that you get the right data in place, and so many things, right? And then of course there is a certain executive layer which needs to be responsible. They need to be the approver of that. So that communication gap also really bothers. There is a large gap between the right stakeholders, the data scientists and whatnot. So it's a very complicated scenario when you think about it, really. And when it comes to governing, and when you think of a tool, you cannot think of two separate tools for your two separate models. For example, your traditional AI and ML models will be governed differently, your Gen AI models will be governed differently. Now again, that is a lot of complexity, that is a lot of cost as well. You follow certain tools, certain guidelines for one and the other. The value proposition really cannot come if you think like that. You cannot work in silos. So some of the complications that everybody, all the organizations, all the enterprises that face are these complications. So then what do you really do about it, and what is IBM's value proposition around it? So IBM has launched Watsonx.governance, which is a really powerful toolkit which can do all of these, right? Which can help you direct, manage, monitor all of these AI activities, be it traditional data science, be it generative AI. It is a toolkit that ensures that all of these risks, all of these complications are simplified for you, and then you get sort of one thing for one toolkit for all sorts of activities, for all sorts of monitoring, right from the data to the post production. You are ensured that one platform will be able to do all of those things. Now, before I get into more details of Watsonx.governance, I just want to spend a little bit of time on the AI life cycle itself, right? Because you're saying you want to govern everything, but there are so many complications. But let's really take a step back and understand what is the flow really? What does it look like when it comes to these building these AI models? So first thing could be, there is some executive who has just come to the data scientist team, and they are asking to that we have a really eureka moment here. We want to build this use case. So get started and build that model for me. It could be a Gen AI model, it could be a traditional AI ML model. So it really starts from that, when you get that idea or get that request from your executives that I need a model to do so and so for my organization. So then you start building that model, and that's stored in your model inventory. So you've captured all the facts, and you've captured all the data, and you've captured everything that has gone into building that model. So that becomes the first step, and that becomes the model inventory of the sorts, right? And then second is the risk governance part. Now that I have a model in place, now I can really start thinking about the governance, right? So what can you do? You need to ensure that the facts around the model, the data which it was trained on, which training technique was used in case of LLMs, what was the prompt that was used, who is responsible for training the model, if there's any other metadata that I should be aware of, all of those things are in place. So then you can think about governing those, right? When once you know what has gone in, what has been followed, what is the framework, that is when you can start governing it. That is when you can start monitoring it. And so the last part is the evaluation and the monitoring. Now that you have the model, now that you have all the facts around it, now you can really evaluate and monitor it, right? Is it accurate enough? Where, how far along the line does it start to drift? Is it biased? Is it able to explain the source of its answers? So all of those things then become a part of your evaluation and monitoring process. So now that could be again deployed over any any platform, right? It could be deployed over IBM, AWS, or whatever the platform that you have used. Your tool should really be able to govern and capture all of this. It should be platform agnostic, which is what Watsonx governance is really, right? So then I spoke about the life cycle, but just capturing a few necessities around it, right? How do you monitor and evaluate, right? um, how do you ensure that it is fair? How do you ensure that all the personal information has been hidden or masked or not being used? And then you explain the predictability of it, you explain the output of it, right? um, Instead of data scientists doing all of this manually, it should all be automated. There should be less and less of manual work and more of automation that should go into the toolkit, right? And then you have to gather all the facts at all the stages. It's not just when you start building it, even after post deployment, as I mentioned, all the facts, all the matrices should be captured. And again, all of that should be automatically gathered, because you cannot depend on so much of manual work. Your data scientist cannot spend its time in building reports and capturing all this data and doing all of these tests, instead of really focusing on development of the model or the idea of the next use case and things like that, right? So again, it should be all automated. And then once you have those, there in an organization, in an enterprise, you really need to follow a lot of workflows. There has to be one person who is responsible, so he needs to approve that, then he can take it to the leadership, and then everybody should have a view of the model, right? Now a leadership, or maybe a chief risk officer or a chief compliance officer, cannot spend their time in reading all the facts. It should be a high level view for them, whereas it should be a lower level view for the person who's taking on this project. So now all of these should, your toolkit, your tool should be able to do all of this at different levels, and it should be able to do all of this simultaneously, right? You cannot depend on different tools and different places to do all of this. This all should be a part of one platform, which is what Watsonx.governance really focuses on. So, like I said, it can manage the entire life cycle. It can manage the process. It can capture all the facts, and be it any use case, be it any industry, geography, technology, all of those things are really taken care by Watsonx.governance. Now I want to move on to the demo part of it, where I want to show two things as part of the demo. One is the model evaluation, and second is the model monitoring. So I'm gonna stop sharing and get those videos up. Just give me 1 second. Can you see my screen now?
Not it, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is my browser visible now?
Yes, 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 ma'am.
All right. So this is a demo and an example of how it is monitoring, evaluating and documenting all of those things around the model. And can you hear the audio as well? Just give me.
WatsonX.governance features automated evaluation
Can you hear the audio?
Yes, yes, it's clear.
capabilities that can help streamline and standardize the performance measurement of prompts and models. Let's see how it works. With just a few clicks, you can use WatsonX.governance to document your prompt engineering activities. Simply navigate to the use case inventory and select a use case. WatsonX.governance automatically captures key information about model development, including the methodology, the model details, and the prompt parameters. From here, you can check that the prompts are performing with suitable accuracy and that they're not producing potentially harmful or inappropriate content. An intuitive wizard tool provides instructions on how to initiate evaluations. You can choose from a wide range of metrics, including those associated with common generative AI tasks like summarization, question and answering, retrieval augmented generation, content generation, and classification. After you've selected your desired metrics, upload test data containing the known gold standard or ground truth. Then set your input and reference output. Once the wizard is run, you can quickly view the documented metrics in a fact sheet, which also contains key information like use case name and task type. To see how using model evaluation and documentation can drive responsible, transparent, and explainable AI workflows, sign up for a free trial of WatsonX.governance.
And just one more minute I'm going to take, and then I'm going to hand it over to the next speaker. Just give me one more minute where this is a demo of model monitoring.
Sure, ma'am, sure.
WatsonX.governance helps you monitor AI performance so you can mitigate issues related to drift, quality, and safety metrics. Let's see how it works. Once you've tested and approved an application for production, the monitors are enabled and will generate alerts when appropriate. For instance, this drift alert indicates that model performance may have deteriorated, a common occurrence as data changes over time. Further investigation is warranted. In the impacted app, the prompt is generating summaries of inconsistent style and length. You can quickly pursue remediation by re-engineering the prompt, selecting a different model, or re-evaluating and redeploying. You can easily establish alerts that are triggered when drift thresholds are breached or when undesirable language or personal identifiable information is inputted to or outputted from a model. Alerts can also identify when there are changes to metrics like data size, latency, and throughput. Model monitoring is logged automatically and integrated into a fact sheet, delivering a comprehensive performance and risk management view across the app development lifecycle. To see how using model monitoring can drive responsible, transparent, and explainable AI workflows, sign up for a free trial of WatsonX.governance.
All right, so those were the demos that I wanted to show. If I'm sorry, in the interest of time, I will not be taking the questionnaire right now, but of course, Vinod and the team can hand over the questions to me. I can address them. And if there are any, interests around this area, governance, large language models, or even IBM's platform, you can reach out to me. You can get my contact details from the NeubAItics team, and I'll be happy to help you. I'll be happy to show more demos, or even have a discussion which is more in depth, which is more directed towards certain topics. And that's it from my end. I hope I was able to give you some key bits that you can take and think about when it comes to risks and governance around these large language models.
Yeah, ma'am, thank you. Really, thank you so much. In your tough time, you have given away this session in a beautiful way. And I just want to say you that it is very simple, and you have given the AI governance complications in a beautiful manner with examples and a demo too. So really, thank you for thank you, thanks for that, ma'am. So dear participants, as per the request from the speaker, we are